No sé si la luna tuvo algo que ver en esto al principio, pero puedo asegurar que para mí no significaba mucho. Estaba feliz siendo piloto de prueba de jets. Para mí los cohetes no eran para volar, sino para hacer fuegos artificiales. Todo eso cambió muy pronto, pues entramos en una competencia y el poner a un hombre en un cohete se convirtió en lo más importante del mundo para nosotros. Inmediatamente pensé que ese hombre debía ser yo. Es la naturaleza de un piloto de prueba. Quiere ser siempre el primero. La luna era para nosotros la meta, una pista de carreras por estrenar. El destino, la suerte, los rusos o lo que fuera, nos puso en el centro de atención. Volar el aparato era solo media tarea. La otra mitad era hacer que pareciera cosa fácil. Esa es la parte que nadie percibió entonces. Nunca fue fácil, ni seguro, ni simple cuestión de rutina. Puedo garantizar que nadie ha escuchado aún la historia real. Fue toda una aventura.
Listen, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Habían pasado 8 años desde que Kennedy dijera que pondríamos a un hombre en la luna para el final de la década. Nos quedaban solo 5 meses. Estábamos demasiado ocupados preparándonos para nuestro primer viaje a la luna, como para preocuparnos demasiado por los rusos. Entonces la CIA nos dio un aviso de alarma que no podíamos ignorar. Una fotografía de satélite nos mostraba un cohete ruso, listo en una plataforma soviética. Y este solo podía tener una meta: la luna. 24 horas más tarde el cohete estaba destruido. Había explotado en plena plataforma. Los rusos estaban fuera de combate, pero su desastre nos recordaba una vez más que esta era la empresa más peligrosa del mundo. Verano de 1969, pero esto que ven aquí no es Woodstock, sino el lanzamiento a la luna en Cocoa Beach. El mundo entero había venido a mirar. Yo aún estaba plantado, dirigiendo la oficina de astronautas y haciendo muchas cosas menos volar. Los días de lanzamiento eran los peores, me sentía como un niñero. El 16 de julio de 1969, la rutina fue igual que siempre. Despertarlos, darles de comer, ponerlos en el autobús. Solo que este equipo se dirigía a la luna. Me hacía sentir muy mal. Podía enviar a quien quisiera allá arriba menos a mí mismo o a mi amigo Al Shepard. El programa había avanzado mucho desde que Al se convirtiera en el primer estadounidense en visitar el espacio. Aún así, entre ambos no habíamos pasado más de 15 minutos allá arriba, él 15 y yo 0. Al tenía problemas de oído y yo tenía problemas cardíacos, con lo cual ninguno de los dos iría a ninguna parte.
15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Good luck.
El despegue fue estupendo. Ya lo habíamos realizado antes. Lo que nos preocupaba era poder tocar la superficie lunar. Eso no era seguro, pero se pensaba que después de 11 intentos fallidos de alunizar, esta vez o la próxima lo lograríamos. Teníamos la determinación de llegar allí antes de 1970.
Apollo 11, this is Houston. You are confirmed to go for orbit.
Allá en la sala de control miré a Al, y ambos tuvimos el mismo pensamiento. Yo debería estar allá arriba.
Obviously, I think every one of us wanted to land on the moon. That's what we were there for.
La NASA podía impedir que subiera un cohete, pero no podía hacer que dejara de volar. La competencia para los vuelos espaciales era siempre dura, pero cuando seleccionaba a los tripulantes para los primeros lanzamientos a la Luna, hacía que los candidatos volaran mi jet uno a uno. Debían impresionarme con sus destrezas. No estoy sugiriendo para nada, claro, que los estuviera manipulando.
Everybody knew who you had to impress, but it was hard to figure out how. It was dog eat dog.
El modo en que seleccionaba a los tripulantes para los lanzamientos a la Luna no es un misterio. Me parecía que cualquiera de los chicos haría un buen trabajo, así que armaba una lista con 18 de ellos y les decía: uno de ustedes va a ser el primer hombre en caminar sobre la Luna. No sé cuál ni me importa. Todos están igualmente calificados. Claro que sabía que había uno mejor que todos los demás, pero yo no podía ir.
Apollo 11, this is Houston. You are go for TLI, over.
Roger. Ignition.
We confirm ignition, and the thrust is go.
Apollo 11, roger. Houston, Apollo 11 entered and gave us a magnificent ride.
Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin y Mike Collins. 3 hombres destinados a aparecer en los libros de historia, no debido a sus personalidades ni porque fueran mejores que los demás candidatos. Simplemente habían aparecido en los espacios indicados en la rueda de turnos.
Apollo 11, this is Houston.
Looks like it's going to be impossible to get away from the fact that you guys are dominating all the news back here. Even Pravda in Russia is headlining the mission and calls Neil the czar of the ship.
Neil, el zar de la nave. A Buzz le gustaba mucho esa denominación. No le gustaba ser el segundo de nadie. La tensión entre Neil y Buzz llegó a un pico cuando Buzz trató de agarrar el aro de bronce, el primer paso en la Luna.
I'm sure you don't wait until you get on the surface of the moon before you decide who steps out first.
Being first on the moon obviously would be a landmark that everybody would remember, because no one remembers the second guy. Do you remember the second guy to fly the Atlantic?
So I, at one time, made the observation to Neil that I felt we needed a decision on this, and that one way or the other, regardless of how I felt or he felt, we needed to have a decision made on this. And his observation was something to the effect that he realized the historical significance and that he was not going to make a decision that would rule him out of that opportunity.
Buzz Aldrin no dudó en expresar quién sentía que debía ser el primero en dar ese primer paso sobre la Luna.
We had always assumed Neil Armstrong, who was the spacecraft commander, was going to be the first man on the moon. We always felt like it was an unnecessary conflict that was created by Buzz, and kind of it created kind of a bad taste in other people's mouth about Buzz making this fuss about it.
Within a week or two, there was a decision made that Neil would be the first one. And being a military man and understanding seniority, that was perfectly all right with me.
La cuestión se reducía a una palabra: tradición, y esta decía que el comandante siempre va primero. Además, Neil estaba más cerca de la puerta. Pero teníamos problemas mucho más graves que el del primer paso. Ni siquiera sabíamos si lograríamos tocar la superficie.
There were a lot of times when I come home from work and think we just aren't going to get to the moon. We cannot make the lunar module light enough.
El módulo lunar que habíamos diseñado para llegar a la superficie solo podía funcionar con la gravedad de la Luna, así que no lo habíamos probado. Neil tuvo que conformarse con practicar el alunizaje en un simulacro del LEM llamado el marco de cama volante. La moral del equipo llegó a un punto bajo cuando el marco se descontroló. Armstrong logró salir en paracaídas con solo un segundo de ventaja.
11, this is Houston. You are go for LOI, over.
Roger. Go for LOI.
All your systems are looking good.
Everything looks okay up here.
Going around the corner, we'll see you on the other side, over.
Roger. Got them both? And go ahead.
Now, the actual descent, I called the team together and told them that, yeah, we had gone through a tough training period. We were really proud of these people here. We were about ready to sort of write into the history book that no matter what happened, good or bad that day, I was going to be with them. I was very proud of them, and let's go do it.
Okay, all flight controllers going around the horn, gonna go for undocking. Capcom, we're go for undocking.
Roger, Eagle, undock.
Era la primera vez que intentábamos tocar superficie fuera de la Tierra. Cuando probabas un jet, al menos podías escapar en paracaídas y fallaba. Pero si esta cosa llegaba a caerse, Neil y Buzz caerían con ella.
We'll monitor your Delta 8. Beautiful. You're a go to continue power descent. Okay, all flight controllers, go for landing. Retro. Go. Righto. Go. Guidance. Go. Control. Go. Telcom. Go. GNC. Go. Ecom. Go. Surgeon. Houston, you're a go for landing. Over. Roger, understand. Go for landing. 1201. 1201. Roger, 1201.
Alarma 1201. El piloto automático estaba muerto. Estaba muy fuera de la ruta y la pista de aterrizaje que tenían debajo era muy rocosa. Neil trataba de mantenerse arriba mientras encontraba un sitio adecuado para alunizar. Tenía poco combustible.
And they were low on gas.
Okay, we're go. We're go. Same time. We're go. Into the ag, 47 degrees. Roger.
Well, we get to 1 minute fuel remaining, and you'll hear on the voice uplink, you'll hear a very trite 60 seconds.
60 seconds.
It was totally up to the crew from there on, and all you could do is Godspeed. You're sucking air, to put it bluntly.
Forward. 30 seconds. Forward.
By the time 30 seconds was called out, I knew that we were on the final descent. It just seemed like it was a long time. And without saying anything, I was just body English or whatever, trying to encourage Neil, bring it down, and let's get on the ground.
3.5 down, 9 forward. 5%. On any bite? 40 feet down, 2.5. Picking up some dust.
Vamos, chicos, bájenla.
That's looking good, down a half. 4 forward, drift into the right a little. Contact light. Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. We copy you down, Eagle. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
That's the first time you had opportunity to really sit down and say, hey, Christ, we really did.
This is Apollo Control Houston at 105 hours. Now into the flight to Apollo 11.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now. Okay, Neil, we can see you coming. I'm going to step off the limb. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Roger, the EVA is progressing beautifully. They've got the flag up now, and you can see the stars and stripes on the water. Flag up now. Beautiful, just beautiful.
Probably the crucial decision was made in May of 1961 when President Kennedy said we're going to go to the moon in this decade. If he hadn't done that, we might still be horsing around trying to get to the moon.
Siempre pensé que debía tener algo profundo que decirle al equipo esa noche, pero la verdad es que salí caminando al descubierto, miré hacia la luna en el cielo y pensé, vaya suerte que tienen esos tipos allá arriba.
Betsy's up there.
Nunca olvidaré la imagen de esos hombres metidos en esa casa de perros astronaval y Nixon mirándolos como si tuviera miedo de infectarse con gérmenes lunares. Bien, habíamos ganado la carrera a la Luna y Neil Armstrong era el hombre más famoso de la Tierra. Pero no íbamos a detenernos allí. Teníamos planes de hacer estaciones espaciales, grandes bases lunares e incluso viajes a Marte. La única cosa con la que no habíamos contado era con que el público perdiera el interés.
Well, it makes you wonder whether or not we get our priorities in order, actually.
It's not worth it. No way in the world.
Why should they go up there when they have so many ghettos that should be cured? People are going hungry all over the United States, and they need jobs and everything else.
Down to the bed. Man, that may have been a small one for Neil, but that's a long one.
Apolo 12. Era solo el segundo alunizaje y ya la empresa era noticia vieja. El programa estaba siendo cuestionado. Eso significaba solo una cosa para los astronautas. Es posible que nunca llegue a hacer el viaje. Pero había un hombre que estaba decidido a hacer el viaje. Nada podía detener a Al Shepard, ni siquiera el hecho de que había estado plantado en tierra durante 6 años.
I had tried everything that I knew of to figure out a way to cure the Meniere's syndrome. Just absolutely almost at my wit's end when one day Stafford came in and said, you know, Al, I've just been talking to a friend of mine who's involved in the ear business. He's with a clinic in Los Angeles. They've been experimenting with a surgical cure for many years. And I said, Tom, I am on my way.
Al no me dijo que se haría la operación. De un momento a otro se presentó ante mí diciendo que podía ir.
My first move, of course, was to head for a visit with my old friend Slayton. And obviously both of us knew that the next available mission, which had not been announced, was Apollo 13. So I said, Deke, that's the one I want. And Deke said, I think we can work it out. As I recall, the crew tentatively had been assigned for Apollo 13. I frankly don't remember who they were, but I'm sure they were qualified guys.
And disappointed.
And disappointed.
How in the hell did he pull that one off? But to get a flight like that, unreal. And here's Deke, who just had a minor fibrillation, no major problem, and here's Shepard on a command of a lunar mission. Well, he pulled it off.
Pero no lo había logrado del todo aún. Por primera vez en la historia, la junta directiva de la NASA rechazó la tripulación que yo había seleccionado.
Deke came to me and said, you know, Al's been grounded for some time, and we want to make sure that he gets plenty of training before he goes on this flight. So why don't you take 13, and we'll give Al 14. And we were all happy until 2 days out.
We might give you a quick shot of our entertainment on board space.
El mundo entero había visto el primer alunizaje. Ahora no lográbamos ni siquiera que las redes televisivas emitieran este programa en vivo desde el Apolo 13. Preferían emitir telenovelas.
Okay, Jim, it's been a real good TV show. We think we ought to conclude it from here now. What do you think? Roger, sounds good. And this is the crew of Apollo 13. Wish everybody there a nice evening. And hey, Houston, we've had a problem here. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem. Main B bus undervolt. Roger, main B undervolt. Stand by.
Primero hubo una explosión y ahora estaban perdiendo toda su potencia.
Flight, I've got a feeling we've lost 2 fuel cells. I hate to put it that way, but I don't know why we've lost them, and it's not an instrumentation problem.
O2 tank 1 is steadily decreasing.
We had a pretty large bang associated with the caution and warning there.
It doesn't look good.
Of course, we didn't know what caused it. Didn't know whether it was a meteorite that hit someplace. And I looked up at Fred Hayes, who was in the lunar module at the time. I could tell from his expression he didn't know what caused it.
And it looks to me, looking out the hatch, that we are venting something. We are venting something out into space.
I looked out the left-hand window, and it dawned on me that this was oxygen. Didn't take much intelligence on my part to realize that. And that's when the old lead weight went down to the bottom of my stomach. It couldn't have happened at the worst time. 200,000 miles from Earth, and now we have an explosion and we're losing all of our oxygen.
No lográbamos entender lo que había ocurrido. Ya habíamos probado que podíamos manejar emergencias, pequeñas fallas y errores de sistema, pero esto era diferente porque todo estaba fallando al mismo tiempo. Llamamos a todo el personal que teníamos.
When Kraft came in, I said, Chris, I think we're in a bunch of shit.
Here is a bulletin from ABC News. The Apollo 13 spacecraft has had a serious power supply malfunction.
At the moment, the astronauts are continuing to try to isolate their trouble. A late report says the spacecraft now is operating on battery power alone. All unnecessary equipment is being turned off.
I want you to get some guys figuring out minimum power in the LEM to sustain life.
We figure we've got about 15 minutes worth of power left in the command module, so we want you to start getting over in the LEM and getting some power on that.
La nave se quedaría sin energía en 15 minutos. Los tripulantes necesitaban una balsa y lo único que se acercaba en algo a esa función era el módulo lunar.
And about the time they finally called up and said, we think you got a real problem, that you might have to use the lunar module as a lifeboat. Well, Fred and I were already climbing through the tunnel and going back into the lunar module.
I'd say this is as serious situation as we have ever had in manned spaceflight. If at any time in the mission, however, the LEM had separated and we had gotten ourselves into a rendezvous situation or the command module being around the moon, then what you state is absolutely true. It would be a fatal situation.
And that was probably the toughest, undoubtedly the toughest press conference I've ever been to, where I knew the wives and the kids of the guys who were up there and who were close friends of mine, and I wasn't really convinced we were going to get them back. It really didn't look very good at the moment.
Ahora la prensa sí estaba sobre la noticia. La tercera misión a la Luna no había interesado a los canales de televisión, pero un desastre en el espacio llegaría a todos los noticieros. La nave espacial no tenía energía suficiente para dar la vuelta. Teníamos que usar la gravedad lunar para impulsarlos de regreso.
They might have had in the back of their mind, it would be much better for that crew to come back and hit the Earth in some manner. Not so much that it was survivable, but rather than have us as a monument to the space program that would whip around the Earth for infinity.
Era una carrera contra el tiempo. El módulo lunar mantenía vivos a los tripulantes, pero esta unidad no estaba diseñada para hacer un viaje largo.
Fred Hayes determined how much oxygen we had in the lunar module, how long the batteries would last, how much water we had on the lunar module, not just to drink, but also we had to use it to cool all of our electronic systems, otherwise they would fail.
When Deke asked me first, will we have enough power? And I told him very honestly, Deke, I don't think so.
And it turned out that we would run out of electrical power and water long before we could get home.
Teníamos que hacerlos regresar antes. Eso quería decir que debíamos acelerar la nave. Pero con el combustible que tenían solo podíamos hacer un intento.
And just as we were approaching the moon, the ground had called up and said, yeah, we think these procedures will work. Are you ready to copy? And I said, yes. And I looked over at my companions. And I said, gentlemen, what are your plans here? And they said, Jim, if we go around the far side of the moon, we're going to take some pictures. And I said, if we don't get home, you won't get them developed.
Okay, look, let's get the camera squared away and get all set for the burn. We got one chance, pals.
Jim, you go for the burn. Go for the burn. Roger, understand. Go for the burn.
Guide, good flight. Control, okay?
Go.
Go, Capcom. Pinko, do you have the Omni for the burn attitude?
We're burning 40%.
West Houston, you're looking good.
Shut down.
Roger, shut down.
I'd say that was a good burn.
Quería que los tripulantes descansaran un poco. Habían estado despiertos durante días.
I see we've gone a hell of a long time without any sleep. I got to start thinking about getting people back to sleep again because I didn't get any sleep last night at all.
You couldn't sleep. I mean, it was just a cold, clammy. Everything was getting wet. All the windows were perspiring. The metal was very cold to the touch. It seemed to sap out any heat out of your body when you touched it.
I developed prostate urinary infection and had the most severe chills and fever that I'd ever had, and at times couldn't stop shaking. And we were trapped in this vehicle.
It was amazing the amount of isolation we had in the spacecraft and not realizing the impact of our crises had back on Earth. You know, we knew we were in trouble. We talked to Houston, but they never relayed back, you know, that the whole world was glued to their TV sets.
It was time for re-entry.
Era el momento de la entrada. La tripulación tenía ya solo unos pocos mililitros de agua. Habían sido los 6 días más largos en nuestras vidas. Ahora ellos tenían que abandonar la balsa y aterrizar en la nave dañada. Habíamos superado varios obstáculos, pero no todo había terminado. Descargamos el módulo de servicio y entonces pudieron verlo, el enorme hueco que había dejado la explosión.
And there's one whole side of that spacecraft missing. The whole panel is blown out. A lot of debris is just hanging out to the side.
Una explosión de esas proporciones podía haber dañado el escudo de calor, y sin ese escudo iban a quedar calcinados. Nadie dijo nada a los tripulantes. Nadie tenía por qué hacerlo. Se había desechado la balsa y la tripulación estaba de vuelta en el módulo de comando dañado, con un escudo de calor poco confiable y apenas combustible suficiente para entrar de nuevo en la atmósfera. No podíamos hacer más que cruzar los dedos.
Okay, LOS in a minute or a minute and a half. An entry attitude we'd like Omni Charlie.
And if there's a time when you died 1,000 deaths, it was wading through that period of time when it was just up to the crew and the good work that you'd done before. And there was no more help nothing you could do. I mean, you were helpless.
Odyssey Houston, standing by, over. 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 Odyssey Houston,
then finally there's that vast relief where you just finally see the spacecraft on TV, you see the chutes blossom out.
And your chutes look good.
Odyssey Houston, we show you on the mains. It really looks great.
Apollo 13, this is recovery, over.
Another chair in the control room as we had splashdown.
This one here, it was really a combination of absolute exhilaration and total exhaustion. But it was just the point, and then I just cried when it was all over.
My interest in aviation goes all the way back to Lindbergh. I was a young boy when he flew. Of course, he immediately became a national hero. He became certainly a hero of mine.
Al Shepard was selected to carry the national image on our first flight in space after we had been shot down by Gagarin. Then it was fitting that after Apollo 13, Al Shepard is the commander of the mission that is going to restore the confidence in the space program.
El piloto renacido y los dos novatos. Así se conocía para entonces a Al, Stu Roosa y Ed Mitchell. Hubo muchas protestas entre el personal, pues Al había elegido a dos hombres sin experiencia de vuelo para ir a la Luna.
Everybody thought we were the three rookies, and in all of my private conversations with Stu and Ed, it was, fellas, we're going to land closer, we're going to bring back the best rocks, we're going to fly the best goddamn lunar mission that's ever been flown.
Nunca nadie luchó tanto como Al Shepard para que le asignaran un vuelo. Y nadie jamás trabajó tanto en prepararse como este viejo veterano del proyecto Mercury y sus dos novatos.
He and I walked out and looked at his Saturn V, 38 stories high, all lit by spotlights. And I've often related that moment to a time 10 years previous when I was a young lieutenant getting up at 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning to watch this guy named Alan Shepard jump on top of a rocket and blast off into space. And here I was 10 years later standing next to that same man. He was going to go to the moon the next morning. You know, how many people can say that?
Después de años de frustración por ver a otro salir de viaje al espacio, Shepard finalmente obtenía su anhelada oportunidad. El primer estadounidense en ser lanzado al espacio viajaría a la Luna.
20 seconds, the guidance system now going internal. 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. Ignition sequence start. Liftoff. We have liftoff from Apollo 14. The tower is clear. 3 minutes past the hour.
Shepard reports roll program completed. Pitch profile still in progress.
Okay, we're 1 Bravo.
Status check in mission control. Coming up all greens on the flight director's console.
In Houston, everything looks good here on the ground.
Apollo 14, Houston. Here, go for the moon, go for TLI.
Right there, go for TLI.
Al había logrado su viaje, pero después del incidente del Apolo 13, no íbamos a dar nada por sentado. Tal y como lo esperábamos, hubo problemas.
The first major function on the flight, of course, was to dock with the lunar module and be on our way.
Houston, we're about to dock.
He hit that thing dead center, bounced right back out with no capture.
Okay, Houston, we did it.
Si no lograban atracar, regresarían directo a casa. El programa espacial no soportaba otra falla.
I thought that maybe I didn't hit it hard enough.
Sure looks like we're closing fast enough. I'm going to back out here and try it again.
You do have a go for another.
Así que volvió a intentarlo.
I hit it fairly hard on that next try. Ed made the comment, said, hey, let's don't run through it.
Well, we better back off here and think about this one, Houston.
That, of course, initially says, hey, you can't go to the moon.
Al había esperado demasiado tiempo como para dejar que un pestillo roto se interpusiera en su camino.
We were so target-oriented that we began thinking about all possible ways to correct the docking problem. And one obvious way which occurred to me immediately was the fact that we could do it manually.
Al proposed to Houston that we put on our suits and depressurize the command module, and he would go outside and pull the two together. This would have been something totally unpracticed, pretty much on the cutting edge of a risky operation, to say the least.
Of course, the immediate reaction on the ground was, well, that guy Shepard really wants to get there, doesn't he?
We suggest you come in hard and fast and retract the arrow immediately.
Roger, Ed. We got a very good picture.
Big guns from Houston.
I believe we got a hard dock, Houston.
It's a hard dock.
Roger, Al. That's great.
Super job.
Everything looks good down here, and you have a go for LOI.
Hey, Pluto, we sure picked a clear day to arrive. There's not much haze in the air at all.
Incredible.
This is really a wild place up here.
Con solo alunizar, Al estaría allí, pero este alunizaje sería el peor que hubiésemos experimentado. Aún contando con un piloto de carga, la zona era una región montañosa con picos de más de 3.000 metros de altura. En el momento en el que Al comenzó a descender, perdió justo lo que más necesitaba. El radar de alunizaje estaba muerto.
And we kept getting lower and lower and closer to 13,000 feet and still no landing radar.
De ninguna manera íbamos a dejar que Al bajara sin un radar. Si no lograba hacerlo funcionar para cuando estuviera a 395 kilómetros, debía abortar la misión.
After all this effort, all this time, we're almost there, and we've got a serious problem here.
A medida que Al se acercaba a los 395 kilómetros, comencé a ponerme nervioso. Existía la posibilidad de que mi viejo amigo no acatara la orden de aborto.
Apollo 14, this is Houston.
The ground rules are sometimes made upon arbitrary decisions. Maybe one could have gone to a lower altitude before deciding to abort. Maybe one could have gone down to the point actually where one could pitch over and actually view the lunar surface. And of course, if one does that, then hypothetically one is able to make a safe landing.
He was not going to abort. He's going to land.
Finally, some bright young man in the control center realized, from looking at his indications, that the radar was in fact on, but it was locked up on infinity. So he said, well, let's turn it off and let it recycle, and I think it might work.
Antares, Houston would like you to cycle the landing radar breaker.
Cycle.
Okay, I would like to accept the radar.
Board radar. Oh, great.
And Antares, Houston, your go for Brahmo.
90 feet. 4 feet per second, 5 feet per second now. Okay, now, looking great.
60 seconds.
Okay, 50 feet down. 50 feet.
In good shape, crew.
50 feet per second. 40 feet. 3 feet per second. 30. 50 feet per second. Looking great. 20 feet. 10. 3 feet per second. Contact now. That was a beautiful one.
You might have sloped, but other than that, we're in great shape. Right on the landing site.
And Mitchell turned to me and said, Al, what were you going to do if the landing radar wasn't working by 13,000 feet? I looked at him and I said, Ed, you'll never know.
Okay, Al, beautiful. We can see you coming down the ladder right now. It looks like you're about on the bottom step and on the surface. That's Bedford, old man. Okay, you're right. And it's been a long way, but we're here.
Así pues, al menos uno de nosotros lo había logrado. Si bien no podía ponerme en los zapatos de Al mientras él estaba parado sobre la luna, comprendía mejor que nadie lo que para él significaba estar allí.
It had been a long build-up to finally reach the point where I was able to stand on the surface of the moon. It was an emotional moment for me. It was a sense of personal triumph, personal satisfaction. In a few moments of maybe patting myself on the back before it became obvious that we had to get back on schedule and get on with the job.
Take a look at Palmaro. Take a look at Cone Crater, I should say. And it's a very impressive sight. Okay, we're where do you think's a good spot for the Alstem? Soil here is a bit firmer, I think. Almost 2 hours now, is that right, sir?
No sé si Al regresó realmente con las mejores piedras, pero sin duda regresó con muchas. La misión había sido un éxito, pero Al no había terminado aún. Había un lanzamiento lunar que quería hacer antes de irse.
Okay, Houston. In my left hand, I have a little white pellet that's familiar to millions of Americans. Drop it down. So I'm going to try a little sand trap shot here.
That looked like a slice to me, Al.
Miles and miles and miles.
Maybe Al Shepard will tell us for the first time what the brand of that golf ball was he hit on the moon.
Nice try, John. But I think the real thing is the truth of how far it went. We can get all different stories on that.
Crew of Antares is leaving from our base.
Roger, Al. Yeah. You and Ed did a great job.
And with this closeout, Al Shepard, now at age 27 years, becomes the undisputed leader in time spent working on the moon.
3, 2, 1. Zero. What a liftoff. And liftoff. Roger, ignition.
When we left the moon, and that's such a beautiful sight where you're coming up off the moon and you're going so fast. I mean, it is so beautiful. And I said, Al, have you got something prophetic to say? And he looked over at me and he said, Stu, you know me better than that. And that's typical Al.
One of the moments which I shall never forget occurred 3 weeks after the return from the moon. My father and I were just having a little brandy in the living room. And out of the blue, he said, do you remember when you first called us back in 1959 and said you were going to become an astronaut? I said, yes, sir. And he said, do you remember what I said? I said, yes, sir, I certainly do. You were not in favor of it. And he raised his glass and said, I was wrong. That's all he had to say.
Apolo 17. El último lanzamiento a la Luna. Ni siquiera Al Shepard podía cambiar la tendencia de la opinión pública. Su misión había sido un éxito, pero Estados Unidos le había dado la espalda a la Luna. Se cancelaron las misiones Apolo 18, 19 y 20.
17 Houston, you are go for orbit. Go for orbit.
We knew that Apollo 17 was the end of Apollo. The press would never forget it. They kept saying, how does it feel to be the tail of the dog, or how does it feel to be part of the end? And, you know, guys were losing their jobs as a result of Apollo. As soon as we lifted off, all the Grumman crew got their pink slips.
Había una sensación de profundo desencanto porque el programa estaba terminado. Yo también estaba desencantado, por supuesto, pues nunca había tenido la oportunidad de ir a la Luna. Pero más allá de eso, habíamos armado un enorme equipo y una tecnología específica para esto. Parar en ese momento no tenía ningún sentido.
Historians will look back on this program and wonder why the United States, at the height of its technological achievement, just quit.
Sure, I knew that I would be the last man of Apollo to walk on the moon, and it might be as long as 10 or 15 or 20 years. But truly, when I left the surface, I believed then, and I believe now, someone will be back someday.
May the spirit of peace in which we came be reflected in the lives of all mankind.
Esas fueron las últimas palabras oficiales pronunciadas en la Luna.
Now, the unofficial words are about 10 seconds before Jack Schmitt and I lifted off, and I just looked over at Jack and I said, Jack, let's get this mother out of here.
Proceeded. 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Right away, Houston. Vector good.
I remember when I called George Lowe and told him I was leaving the program, He wrote me a very nice letter, and in that letter he said, "There'll never be another Apollo in anybody's life." And I thought maybe that says it all.
Pero la historia no termina aún. Queda un capítulo por relatar, y es el mío. Siempre supe que estaban equivocados con respecto a mi corazón y que algún día me encontraría en la posición de decir, Dick Slayton, astronauta. Sabía que hubiera podido estar en cualquiera de esas misiones, pero los doctores se afincaban en mi arritmia cardíaca. Pero el problema terminó tan inesperadamente como había comenzado. Tenía un fuerte resfriado y comencé a tomar muchas vitaminas. Fue entonces cuando me di cuenta de que hacía meses que mi corazón no se saltaba un latido. Claro que no fue nada fácil convencer a los médicos de la NASA de que las vitaminas podían curar una fibrilación cardíaca.
We knew more about Dick Slayton's heart than any person we ever flew, and that goddamn doctor stood up in the meeting and said, "Well, we know we've said that before, but if he fibrillates on the pad, we want to stop the count." And I fired that son of a bitch.
When Deke was able to finally get approval to fly again, I was just so delighted for him, so happy. And I thought, well, this guy really wants to fly. He's even going to learn how to speak Russian so he can fly in space.
Boris,
all of us wanted to be first at something. Maybe there was some poetic justice there in Deke's case, that he got to make the first joint mission with the Soviets.
Un final digno de Hollywood. Mi viaje a la Luna salió directo de una película llamada Maroon. En ella los rusos eran los buenos chicos y salvaban a 2 astronautas estadounidenses perdidos en el espacio. Esta película ayudó a convencer a ambos países de la posibilidad de una misión conjunta, incluso en medio de la Guerra Fría.
I want to be a movie star.
Alexei Leonov, cosmonauta y mi amigo, era uno de los hombres con quienes habíamos estado compitiendo para llegar a la Luna. Ahora estábamos en el mismo equipo, entrenando juntos y haciendo nuestra parte en plena Guerra Fría. Aquí me encuentro en medio de otro desayuno previo a un lanzamiento, solo que esta vez no estoy sentado en un lado como espectador. Finalmente ha llegado mi turno.
Good morning again. Jim Hartz and Alan Shepard from the Mission Control Center in Houston, Texas.
At that time, we were very close, having worked together in an administrative capacity over the years when neither one of us could fly. And to finally see my buddy get a chance to give it a go really meant a great deal to me.
5, 4, 3, 2,
engine sequence start. 1, 0, launch commit. We have a liftoff. All engines building up thrust. Moving out. Clear the tower.
Roger, tower clear. Roger, Tom, you got good thrust on all engines. You're right on the money. Roger. Santa Genesis, we're waiting 16 years for.
Hello, Houston, you're go for station.
Roger, go for
El lanzamiento fue maravilloso. ¿Cómo me gustaría hacer uno todos los días? No tuve demasiado tiempo para pensar, pero no pude evitar sentir tristeza de que fuera la última vez que una nave Apolo saliera al espacio. Y por supuesto, pensé también en Gus.
Apollo, Houston, I got 2 messages for you. Moscow is go for docking. Houston is go for docking. It's up to you guys. Have fun.
All righty, sounds good. Apollo Mila Alexei. 3 meters. 1 meter. Contact. Capture.
Si alguien me hubiera dicho al principio que algún día estaríamos dándonos la mano con los rusos en el espacio, creo que le hubiese recomendado que fuera a ver a uno de mis amigos médicos de la NASA. Lo irónico del asunto es que necesitamos a los rusos todo el tiempo. Si ellos no hubiesen estado allí, quizás no hubiésemos tratado de llegar a la Luna. Como sucede en todas las empresas estadounidenses, necesitamos siempre a un competidor.
All philosophers say the best part of a good dinner is not what you eat, but with whom you eat.
Let me call to express my very great admiration for your hard work, your total dedication in preparing for this first joint flight.
Deke, you've had a very, very long record of distinguished service preparing other astronaut crews for various space missions. And we're extremely pleased to see you on the crew of the first international manned space flight. As the world's oldest space rookie, do you have any advice for young people who hope to fly on future space missions?
Well, yes, I have a lot of advice for young people, but I guess probably one of the most important bits is to, number one, decide what you really want to do, and then secondly, never give up until you've done it.
Al principio no compartíamos un sueño, sino un impulso, el deseo de llegar a ser los mejores. Llegar más lejos, más rápido y más alto era nuestro sueño de vida. Pero, ¿quién hubiese podido saber qué nos llevaría tan lejos?
I feel so fortunate that I happen to be around at a time after hundreds of thousands of years when people, whether they moved out of a cave or not, looked up and looked at stars and things and wondered what's up there. And we haven't gone very far yet. We're a tiny little distance off the Earth. But how lucky we are to have been around and to have been able to take part in some of those first little steps.
Fuimos pilotos de prueba y estábamos en el momento y en el lugar justos. Fuimos rivales, amigos, compañeros de viaje, y estuvimos entre los hombres más afortunados del mundo. Dick Slayton, astronauta, murió de cáncer en el año 1993 durante la filmación de esta serie. Su corazón se mantuvo fuerte hasta el final de sus días. 6 horas después de su muerte, se vio despegar al avión de Dick desde un aeropuerto de California. No es solo que Dick hubiera muerto tan solo pocas horas antes, sino que ese mismo avión estaba en un museo de Nevada ese mismo día y a esa misma hora. Dick siempre decía, pase lo que pase, mantén vivos tus sueños.
Godspeed and good tailwinds, buddy.